Yeah, I uh, I actually didn't think I'd see this day.
Me either.
Um, I I have never met Julian Assange. We corresponded in his last months in the Ecuadorian embassy, um, and I owe a lot to Randy Credico for introducing me to him and for really emphasizing the importance of this case. Randy was doing um, these countdown to freedom broadcasts, regular interviews with Julian Assange on WBAI at Pacifica that were absolutely seminal at a time when Assange was being relentlessly demonized as a rapist, as a Russian asset. A lot of influential people were saw him as radioactive. He hadn't really become a cause celeb at that point. So it's really thanks to activists like Randy that I got more involved in advocating for Assange's freedom, learning about his case. Then ultimately, through knowing Julian Assange, well, he gave me a tip. This was like late 2018, I believe, that there was someone in Spain running around offering photos of him in the embassy in, very candid scenes that no one should possess in the private realm. And they were asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars to give these exclusive photos away. And I made contact with those people who were working for some shady media organization in Spain. I spoke to them and I arranged a meeting. Honestly, like looking back, I should have gone to the meeting, but members of Julian's legal team went to the meeting. They learned that these photos had been taken from the embassy by the security detail, which was run, they eventually learned, by a criminal security contractor named David Morales, who ran a company called UC Global, some small time company. And they went on to get a contract after being recruited apparently by the CIA at a Las Vegas Security Expo held in Sheldon Adelson's Sands Hotel. Adelson became the CIA's front man, kind of like the cutout to keep their fingerprints off the operation. And his security team helped run it and guide David Morales as he surveilled Assange inside the embassy. Morales was eventually arrested on illegal gun charges, burglary. I mean, they were robbing the offices of Assange's lawyers. This was like an international criminal operation being run by the CIA, a very violent one. Of course, we now know they're proposing to poison Assange. And the Spanish National Police arrested Morales, put him on trial in the national court, the same court where Pinochet was tried. And through that court, we learned all these details about the CIA operation. I think was it Michael Isikoff and his team at Yahoo News that first started reporting on some of them, like the poisoning?
Well, no, it was you actually, Max, because your story came before the Isikoff story.
Okay, my story came before the Isikoff story, and I don't remember if I broke the news about the poisoning.
It was mentioned in that story, I'm pretty sure, because I mean, I'll check right now, but I'm pretty sure it was mentioned that, or at least not to the extent that Isikoff got it, but I think you mentioned that poisoning was discussed.
No, I actually mentioned, I think I actually broke that.
Yeah.
But what I failed to do was lead with it, which was really stupid because I thought, the news is Sheldon Adelson was fronting for this whole operation. Here's the article. The American Friends new court files expose Sheldon Adelson's security team in U.S. spy operation against Julian Assange. But it comes out through this that there was that this was an assassination plot in addition to surveillance in order to neutralize Assange. One of the details I picked up on in this piece was that the head of Ecuador's Sabine Security Services went to meet with Julian Assange, and I think it was December 2018, in order to plan his escape. Not really an escape, because he was going to seek diplomatic asylum through international law from a third-party country, and they were just going to take him out in a car because the British security state was so central to this, MI6, whatever, MI5. They had surrounded the Ecuadorian embassy. Everybody outside, from the delivery guy to pedestrians, were working for them. And so they needed to get out to the airport to get him into a diplomatic flight. And because they were spying on them and the cameras were being literally routed to the CIA through a server run out of Adelson's hotel, they introduced the secret indictment of Julian Assange the following day, allowing for his eventual arrest in April, and this whole legal saga that has taken place ever since. I'd like to believe that through that reporting and through the reporting that so many others have done on the plot against Julian Assange, that we played some kind of role in breaking this persecution of him, but I can't prove it. And I would like to know what he thinks someday. It doesn't look like he has signed any kind of gag order or agreement with the U.S. government to pipe down. So I think we're going to be hearing, we'll eventually learn the full story here.
His lawyer made clear he's not signed any kind of gag order. He has signed something that will drop basically his legal action to address what happened to him. So I don't think he'll be suing over being tortured, and he won't be filing Freedom of Information Act requests. Basically, I think both sides agreed to end the case there, which goes the other way too. So yeah. Assange, but in terms of speaking out publicly, no, he didn't sign a gag order. And also, I've seen this mentioned online and in the chat too. People think that he agreed to delete the DNC emails. It's not true. It's a rumor circulating widely on Twitter. Basically, the DNC emails on WikiLeaks website have been down for a while for reasons I don't know. The WikiLeaks website has had some issues sometimes. Whatever's going on there, it's not because Julian Assange made an agreement to delete them. He did agree to destroy the classified material in his possession, but that stems from this case, from the Chelsea Manning leaks, not the DNC leaks. So, yeah. But in terms of silencing himself, I'm sure after he's taken the time to recover from years of torture, unspeakable conditions, we will hear from him. But let me read from your story, Max. This is May 2020, I think, well before the Isikoff story. And you spoke to, or you got testimony from a former UC Global staffer. This is the contractor of the CIA. Yep. Said, and you write this, the ex-staffer.
So this was the whistleblower who exposed the operation to the Spanish court under Spanish police questioning.
Yes. So the ex-staffer recalled Morales of UC Global, the CIA contractor, mentioning the Americans were desperate to end Assange's presence in the embassy. Thus, they were proposing to activate more extreme measures against him, including the possibility of leaving one diplomatic mission door open, arguing that it was an accidental mistake to allow the entrance and kidnapping of the asylum seeker, or even the possibility of poisoning Mr. Assange. So that was the first time that that this CIA plot to poison Assange was mentioned, at least in Western media. Maybe it was in Spanish media before, but certainly that was the first that I've heard of it. And you haven't gotten the credit for breaking that, but it was there in the Grayzone. And
well, damn, we don't get another time. We don't get credit for something massive.
Well, that was that. Yeah, but that one's kind of on us because we should have made more of that than we did, I think, at the time.
That should have been that should have been a separate article, honestly. Yeah. That's what happens when you're your own editor.
Yes.
But it's in there along with so much on the hounding and persecution of Assange by Mike Pompeo's CIA. Another thing that I learned through that investigation, basically that source there was the whistleblower from UC Global, who was so shocked by what Morales was doing, obviously with CIA pressure to possibly kill Assange, that he went to the Spanish police and dimed him out. I also learned about the details of how the UC Global was hacking into the devices of not just Assange's legal team, his friends. Pamela Anderson had her email hacked into because she wrote down her password on a piece of paper and they captured it on their phones. But also journalists, mainstream US journalists. And this really speaks to the role of the media, not just in this case, but the role of the media and particularly the Washington Post in general as stenographers for the national security state and the malign secret government known as the CIA. This is from a notepad photocopied by Spanish police, which I obtained. We broke this story too. These are notepads about visitors to the Ecuadorian embassy to visit Julian Assange, who were being surveilled, whose devices were being taken and opened under orders from David Morales, who was acting under orders from the CIA. And one of them is Ellen Michiko Nakashima. She opened the door and had a meeting with another woman, etc. And we took her passport. Who is Ellen Nakashima? And they're talking about everything that they took from her, notepads. And she gave up her cell phone, etc. It's all in Spanish because this was an Ecuadorian security team. This is Ellen Nakashima's phone. This is a photo I obtained through this police investigation of Ellen Nakashima's phone. Who is Ellen Nakashima? She is the chief national security correspondent for the Washington Post. This is a CIA contractor's photo, a CIA assets photo. The CIA broke into the phone of the Washington Post's top national security correspondent. And this is the proof. Now, just if you're watching right now, Google the story, the front page story the Washington Post did on the CIA hacking into the device of their top reporter who covers the CIA. And if you actually did that, you will find nothing. They've never reported on this. Now just imagine if Vladimir Putin and the FSB did that to a Washington Post reporter or a New York Times reporter. And there were reporters who report for the New York Times and NPR who also had their devices hacked into by the CIA contractor. You will get, you would never hear the end of it. It would be like Evan Gershkovich on steroids. So why don't they report on this? Number one, it would be biting the hand that feeds them. They, by nature, these reporters rely on their sources from the CIA, from the intelligence services, from the NSC, the NSA, FBI, to do their stories. And they also just culturally and politically align themselves with that class of people in the national security state. They agree with them. And they saw Assange as such a threat to everything they believed in that the Washington Post editorial board celebrated his arrest as a moment of accountability, a welcome moment of accountability. The first time that a foreign police service had been allowed to break into the sovereign diplomatic territory of another country in order to arrest someone who is a citizen of neither country. And the Washington Post welcomed this attack on press freedom because the Washington Post, well, when they get leaks or hacks or whatever, it's only to support the imperatives of the national security state and to call for the criminalization of anti-war reporters like Wyatt Reed and, by extension, ourselves. So I learned a lot through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to illustrate, Ellen Nakashima was the reporter at the Washington Post who was selected by the Clinton campaign to receive the scoop that Russia had hacked the DNC, which was a narrative concocted by the Clinton campaign and their contractor CrowdStrike. And they gave that to Ellen Nakashima. She was the first person to basically kick off Russiagate with that story. And then so Russiagate was used to launder that narrative and in turn to launder the narrative that Julian Assange and Russia were in cahoots. So Ellen Nakashima, being a part of that establishment who's there to push that narrative, doesn't care that the CIA is or a CIA contractor is spying on her personal devices because she's already decided to do the CIA's bidding by pushing their narrative and demonizing Assange. And so therefore something like this is just, it doesn't matter. And but now, of course, that narrative about Russian hacking has been so damaging in so many reasons. It helped, destroy any possibility of diplomacy between the US and Russia, helped manufacture consent for the Ukraine proxy war, and it helped enroll liberals in this demonization campaign against Julian Assange and blaming him for Hillary Clinton's victory and painting him as a Russian agent. And this narrative that Russia hacked the DNC, even though there's been so much countervailing evidence, even though Julian Assange has always said from the start that no state actor was his source, including Russia. All that gets ignored, and still it gets widely repeated that Russia hacked the DNC. So, for example, this is the New York Times today. Charlie Savage, their legal correspondent, wrote a decent article about how the Assange plea deal is a threat to press freedom. But he just casually mentions that he says Assange timed the release of those messages obtained by Russian hackers. He's talking about the DNC leaks. He just declares, takes it as an article of faith that Russian hackers stole the emails and gave them to Assange, even though Assange denies that, and even though there's been so much countervailing evidence that we've gone through at the Grayzone many times. But he just writes that because he takes what the government says at face value and what the Clinton campaign says at face value. And the whole body of work of Julian Assange, if there's one lesson from it, it's that you should never take anything government says on faith because they lie all the time. But yet this Russian hacking claim has been so useful to the establishment narrative for so many reasons, including helping to demonize Assange, that it just persists.